Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Thanksgiving week. Be super thankful you're not in a war in Ukraine. You're not in a war in the Middle East. This week we have good news on the economic front, but also some bad news because the prices of Thanksgiving have gone up 30% since the Biden administration started. Let's go ahead and get going. So overall this week, we had some good news on the economic front. We did have some negative news coming out of, for example, China and also Japan. I'll go through those in just a moment. First and foremost, I always like to say thanks during Thanksgiving. I think you should too. You're not in a war in Ukraine. You're not in a war in the Middle East. You're not a child in poverty and extreme poverty in Latin America or even in Africa, where most people don't even have running water. So be thankful. If your coffee isn't warm enough, if your Wi-Fi isn't fast enough, it's not the end of the world. Just be thankful. Traditional Thanksgiving dinner is up more than 30% since Biden took office. There was a lot of media publications and advertising how the cost of Thanksgiving dinner went down from year to year, which is true. I think it went down by about 4 or 5%. But in reality, it's up over 30%. And if you guys remember, I just went to Chipotle in Miami, right? We're not going to do the Five Guys story for those of you guys who have been following me for a while, but the Chipotle now is $35 for two people, 2 bowls, and they're also skimping. Have you guys noticed they're skimping on the food now at Chipotle? Before it was $20, 2 drinks, 2 bowls, bag of fries, and now it's $35. And one of the things I noticed also, and I'm curious to see if some of you guys have actually noticed this, the quality of the food in the US is atrocious, much worse than before. This is why I like living overseas when it comes to the quality of food. For example, in Colombia, it just comes from on top of the mountain, right? But it seems like they're putting more chemicals in the food to not provide the real food to save money. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's really, really bad. Markets in the United States, mostly positive. All the markets in the United States, the only one that was negative was the Canadian market, which was down 0.46%. European markets in the overseas market were mostly higher. The only ones in Europe that didn't go up was Italy, which went down by 0.22%. Latin America, mostly higher. Argentina, the Merval, went up by over 42%. The first presidential candidate that won as a libertarian won in Argentina this week. He talked about things like closing the central bank, dollarizing the economy, even trying to get rid of a lot of the equality ministry, for example, so everybody can be poor the same. It sounds much funnier in Spanish, but the inclusion ministry and all these things, so everybody can be the same at the same poverty rate, basically. Argentina, if you didn't know, in 1900 was the richest country in the world. Not one of the richest, not the top 5, top 3, the richest. They've been voting for socialist policies for the last 70 years, and now they have 40% poverty in the country, unfortunately. So he looks to change some things. Hopefully he will be able to, because just like in the US, we've had those elite corrupt people at the top eating nice for the last however many decades, so it's going to be hard for them to change, but it'll be good to see Argentina change once and for all. The Paris of the South, beautiful, but not kept up as it should. Markets in the Middle East and Africa, mostly mixed. Egypt was the biggest winner there, and then in the far East and Asia, Australia, and that region, mostly mixed markets, and one of the most positive was the Kospi in South Korea. Bitcoin and crypto news, a lot of news in the crypto space. South Korea has announced that they're going to do a pilot program for their government coin, or CBDC, for 100,000 people. If you guys remember, I always talk to you guys about from the beginning that I love the idea behind Bitcoin. I love freedom. I'm freedom kind of guy. I think that we lived under a much better system a few decades ago when the government wasn't in our lives as much. I think right now we don't live in a capitalist society. We actually live in a socialist society because we need permits to even go to the bathroom, right? But I do believe that what's happening now with the crypto space, and I'll let you guys know what happened with Binance in just a moment, is that the institution or the matrix, the system, if you will, is kind of getting rid of all the small players to be able to allow the institutions to come in and start controlling that market, which would not surprise me, for example, if that was the plan all along, to be able to institute the crypto space when in regards to a government coin rather than actually being Bitcoin, which is free of the government. Justin Sun with his HTX exchange, crypto exchange, has had over $200 million in hacks. 4 hacks in 2 different occasions, 2 different months. So unfortunately, they lost over $200 million. And Singapore is about to add regulations in 2024, barring crypto services from providing in Singapore from accepting local credit cards, in addition to for the retail customers, which is the people who have a smaller capital. For example, you and I. No financing, no margin, and no leverage at all. Shares in the crypto exchange Coinbase jumped almost 6% after Changpeng Zhao, which is the CEO of Binance, admitted to a plea deal. Binance is now going to have to pay $4.3 billion in the settlement due to the fact that they've been doing some illegal things. And also there was $1.3 billion in user funds that were withdrawn from Binance, which, remember, is still the largest crypto exchange in the world. Crypto this week did go up. It's up 3.60%, 3.60. It's at $37,778, give or take. In commodities, beef prices now are going to hit record highs as ranchers warn of a collapse in cattle production. That's going to possibly make prices double. If you move to a place overseas, for example, like Colombia, your meat cost will probably be about a third of what it would cost in the United States. That is, of course, assuming you learned how to trade or do YouTube videos and you got a side hustle where you can live overseas. Remember, I told you guys. Oil prices fell on Friday after there was a de-escalation in Israel, after there was a ceasefire. There was an agreement between Hamas and Israel. Supposedly, there's a little bit of a hiccup going on with Hamas wanting to release those terrorists. Not terrorists, but the people that were captured. And Qatar said they told Hamas that let's not play around and abide by the agreement. So we'll see. Hopefully that'll work itself out. So due to the de-escalation and the geopolitical situation there in the Middle East, oil went down. The U.S. crude went down by 0.46% to $75.54, while Brent, which is international crude, went down 0.03% to $80.58. Uranium prices have surpassed $80 per pound for the first time in the last 15 years on renewed demand for nuclear power after the Fukushima accident in Japan, which, if you're not aware, basically there was an earthquake, caused some damage. I'm going to really an overview here, not precisely what happened, but there was an earthquake that damaged the nuclear power, and then they started letting go of the nuclear water into the ocean. And so that a lot of people didn't want nuclear power after that accident, but now it looks like they're back at it, because since we're having a lot of energy problems and you can't use anything that's not safe for the environment, for example, like coal, then now the better option is nuclear. Outside of the fact, for example, if you didn't know it, China is opening 2 coal plants a week, and they're on track to have 6 times more coal power than the rest of the world combined. But it's okay if China does it, right? Gold market is off its highs and struggled to hold above $2,000. The central bank appears no rush to lower interest rates very soon. Gold did breach 2,000 and closed above 2,000 for the first time in a while this week. It closed at $2,003.70. Gold went up 1.05% this week, and silver was really the big mover. It went up over 2.50%, and that closed at $24.42. Financial and banking news, New Year's nightmare. The IRS now is starting to target gig workers. If you guys don't know what that means, basically the people who work for Uber and TaskRabbit and kind of all these extra jobs, they're sending 30 million in new tax forms. And the far right Dutch elections and the politics, actually, let me back up for a second. I'll get to the elections in just a second. The Dutch central bank is admitting that they're preparing for a new gold standard, and they're saying that if there is a financial crisis, that they're ready to underpin the currency that they're using to gold. According to them, India and Egypt are abandoning the dollar. More and more countries are starting to use the dollar much, much less. If you guys didn't know as well, in global trade, the yuan now, which is the Chinese currency, is the second most used currency right now anyway, after the dollar. So it actually surpassed the euro, which is not bueno. And Los Angeles in 2023 is leading the world, leading the nation, I should say, in shoplifting, thanks to those wonderful communist policies. And China's central bank held their first year and 5-year prime loan rates the same. This is part of the reason why the demand for the yuan went up, because now a lot of corporations are going out and taking out loans in yuan to be able to take advantage of those lower interest rates. And the South Korean production price index rose 0.8% in October. This isn't a big piece of news when it comes to South Korea, but remember that South Korea, although now one of the largest economies in the world, is the 6th largest exporter in the world. Canada inflation eased by more than expected in October at 3.1%. The core inflation, which doesn't include food or energy, is at its lowest point in the last 2 years, likely closing the door to further interest rate hikes. In Singapore, their CPI, the Consumer Price Index, went to 4.7%, and that's the second month that their inflation has actually went up rather than down. Turkey's central bank increased their interest rates to 40% to try to hold back the 61% inflation rate that they have in October. And in political news, a major Oxford study backed by scientists at Oxford. If you guys don't know, Oxford is the university in England, one of the quote-unquote best in the world. They revealed that the strict pandemic lockdowns were no more effective than Sweden's open economy approach during the pandemic. If you guys haven't noticed, the people who haven't gotten the thing in their arm for the pandemic are not dead yet, just in case you were wondering. And in regards to the pandemic, New York State, the Communist Republic of New York, has reinstated a law called Law 213, which is a quarantine law, where basically they could literally just grab you out of your house and throw you into a quarantine camp with no due process and for no reason whatsoever. So if you're living in New York, I would be very careful, because now the New York government can just come in and grab you whatever they want, and you have zero due process. Look it up. That's what I think they want for the entire world. Chicago crime rate hits a post-pandemic record. Excuse me. It's almost up 60% in 2023. Keep voting for those communists. You get what you pay for. And third world country of Argentina was able to count 100% of their more than 32 million votes by hand the same day. Ironically, in the last election in the United States, they took them over a week to count 2.5 million votes in Arizona. I wonder what the difference is between the U.S. and Argentina, where a quote-unquote third world country can count 32 million votes without a problem the same day. But in the United States, we have magical votes appearing out of the blue in the middle of midnight. As Stalin once said, it's not who votes, it's who counts the votes. Javier Milei, the first libertarian in the world, won the presidential elections in Argentina. As I mentioned to you guys before, the inflation rate is 143%. And just like we got that strong deep state in the United States, they've had a 70-year strong deep state, mulching off of the Argentinian people, unfortunately. So now, hopefully, he's going to get some things done to help the Argentinian economy. And the Dutch anti-Islam, anti-EU popular politician Geert Wilders, which is known as the extreme right, won the leading exit poll. So now he's going to form his government to try to be able to go ahead and rule in the Netherlands as well. I like one of the things actually that Elon Musk said on Lex Fridman's podcast, where it seems like the left has gone kind of to the extreme left, and now anything that is an extreme left is extreme right and conspiracy theorists and everything. When in reality, the only thing that's happened is that the left has actually moved to the extreme rather than everybody else being extreme. I thought that was really interesting. And New Zealand's National Party also reached an agreement to form a government. The center-right National Party won there as well. In economic news, Streaming accounts for nearly 40% of TV consumption now. Biden inflation is crushing the housing market, which is about 17% of the U.S. economy. If you didn't know, the existing home sales are at the slowest pace in 13 years. The bottom 80% are poorer since the pandemic, creating a Robin Hood mentality. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the United States, they only allowed the big corporations to stay open. So there's a situation where, mom and pop stores couldn't stay open, but the big corporation could. So essentially what they want is they want the big corporations to control everything because they can put the regulations to control the big corporations. So they don't want you to be on your own, essentially, right? Bill Gates is teasing a 3-day work week after he said that machines and artificial intelligence can make all the food and stuff. They're already testing this. Samsung in South Korea, for example, is giving 1 Friday off a month. And Iceland also, the unions there have declared that they have a right to request a shorter work week. China's property market, substantial percentage of the economy, is going to need a lot more government support after the sales prices are down. The prices are down since October 2014. Remember that China is the second largest economy in the world. So if a big percentage of the second largest economy in the world isn't doing well, and the Chinese economy, or the government, I should say, isn't propping up the market enough, then what's going to happen is that the whole world economy is going to go down. U.S. initial jobless claims week ended in November 18th came in at 209,000, which is down 24,000 from the previous week. That's not a good thing due to the fact that if the jobless claims or people requesting unemployment benefits are going down, that means that in the eyes of the central bank in the United States that the economy is doing well. Now, that means for them that the economy is doing well, that means that the interest rates are either going to continue to increase or stay for higher for longer, which means that the economy isn't going to keep moving or doing well, so to speak, which is not bueno at all. GBP, the pound and the UK gained ground against the dollar and the euro after the European economy of the UK started to recover and was back to growth. And Germany, which is the 4th largest economy in the world, the largest in Europe, has been extremely weak due to the fact that they've been hit quite a bit by the high energy costs, weak global borders, or global orders, I should say, not borders, and also higher interest rates. So their economy shrank in Q3 compared to the previous 3 months. And Japan's factory activity contracted in November. Remember that Japan is the 3rd largest economy in the world, and they produce quite a bit of things, Toyota, Honda, all these cars, a lot of electronics as well. And it's a 6th straight month that the activity in Japan has actually contracted. Corporate data, new traffic data shows that Twitter, or as Musk call it now, X, is surpassing Instagram and Facebook in traffic. The media would have you believe that they're on their deathbed, especially if you guys remember when they were talking about Threads being the Twitter killer. Threads turned out to just burn out, and now Google is one of the top 100 organic domains, meaning there's a lot more people that are Googling and using Twitter, X, rather than Instagram and Facebook, which is interesting. And Sam Altman's firing at OpenAI, supposedly this huge fiasco that happened with ChatGPT, the founder, is because they revealed an AI that could lead to a threat to humanity. So that was interesting as well. Trade news, Ukraine was the 4th largest grain supplier in the world before the conflict with Russia. Now they're missing about $25 billion in revenue, and their 23-24 year is going to be 28% less than the year before. So the Ukraine economy isn't doing as well at all. And in technology, SpaceX launched their 2nd Starship rocket flight on Saturday, pushing development mammoth vehicle past new milestones. They basically decided to blow it up after it took off, but it looks like they're definitely moving in that direction. One of the things I found really interesting about the Starship idea is that Elon Musk is talking about actually shipping things around the world with the Starships rather than via boat. So you can essentially ship anything from most places around the world in about 2 hours or so, which is really interesting. The EU and European Parliament have not followed or have not passed any AI regulation, but now we have 3 countries, which is Germany, France and Italy, which has passed an agreement, so to speak, not law, so to speak. But if people don't follow the laws, then obviously they're going to look to do fines and things of that nature. And investment news: October weaker than expected. Housing data indicates that housing buyers are starting to feel the pressure by higher rates. Existing home sales fell at the lowest since August of 2010. And global smart sales are starting to get impacted by component shortages. The sales rose in October after declining 27 straight months, even with the launch of the new Samsung Galaxy series and the iPhone 15 with titanium, because everybody's going crazy about the titanium. iRobot went up almost 40% after there was a jump that the EU now is going to allow Amazon to buy iRobot. Remember that there was pictures of a lady sitting in a toilet that were publicly shared on Facebook. So I'd be really careful if you guys are going to use things like iRobot. Just don't let it go into the bathroom with you because you don't want your photos to appear online. International events. Finland's prime minister said that he's going to close more of the borders with Russia due to the fact that they're saying that Russia is allowing migrants from the Middle East and Africa go through their country without papers to allow them to enter to Finland. I mentioned the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And Dublin, the capital of Ireland, a huge protest setting places on fire after a migrant killed 3 young children with a knife. So it looks like the people there are starting to not like the migrants either. And an interesting fact this week: Gunung Padang in Indonesia may actually be the world's oldest pyramid, much older than the Egyptian pyramids, if you believe the year that they put the Egyptian pyramids at. The scientists found that they date back to the last ice age, which was 14 to 25,000 years ago. And if you haven't watched Graham Hancock's series on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse, highly recommended. He talks a lot about Gunung Padang. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, the preppers are right.